I stared at my phone screen reading the text message for the fifth time in 60 seconds. Emergency dinner at 7 p.m. Don't be late. The number belonged to my mother, Patricia Hartwell, the woman who held my funeral 15 years ago. The woman who declared me dead to our entire family because I refused to join the construction business and chose Silicon Valley instead. Now I'm 38, worth $2.3 billion, and apparently she saw yesterday's Forbes article calling me the youngest Fortune 500 CEO in America. I grabbed my lawyer's business card and smiled grimly. Time to bring along a very special foreclosure notice. The drive through Millbrook felt like traveling through a graveyard of memories. Every street corner reminded me of the life I'd abandoned, or rather the life that had violently rejected me. My hands gripped the steering wheel tighter as I passed Franklin Avenue, where my childhood home still stood. 15 years hadn't changed much about this small Ohio town. The same weathered storefronts lined Main Street, the same rusty water tower dominated the skyline, and the same suffocating sense of limitation hung in the air like morning fog. But I wasn't the same person who'd fled this place with nothing but a Stanford computer science degree and stubborn determination. Today, Build Space Technologies employed over 15,000 people across North America. My project management software had revolutionized how construction companies, ironically enough, managed their workflows. The universe had a twisted sense of humor. I pulled into the parking lot of Romano's Diner, where I'd arranged to meet my lawyer before facing my parents. The familiar neon sign flickered weakly against the gray December sky. This place had been my refuge during high school, where I'd spend hours coding on my laptop while nursing coffee and dodging my father's demands to abandon my computer nonsense. My phone buzzed with a text from David Martinez, my attorney. Running 10 minutes late? Don't go in without backup. David had been my lawyer for 8 years, ever since BuildSpace went public. He'd insisted on preparing extensively for this meeting, knowing this confrontation might eventually come. While waiting, my mind drifted to that terrible day 15 years ago. I'd graduated summa cum laude from Stanford, my head buzzing with ideas about artificial intelligence and project management solutions. Coming home should have been a celebration. Instead, it became a funeral. Conrad, your grandfather built Hartwell Construction with his bare hands. My father Robert had said that morning in our kitchen. His voice carried the weight of 3 generations of manual labor. Your great-grandfather laid the foundation. I've spent 30 years growing this business. It's your birthright. Dad, I appreciate everything our family built, but technology is the future. I want to create something that helps construction companies work smarter, not just harder. Smarter? His face flushed red. Boy, there's nothing smarter than knowing how to pour concrete and frame a house. That computer degree is worthless paper. My mother had been washing dishes, her movements becoming increasingly aggressive as our voices rose. Patricia Hartwell had always been the enforcer in our household, the one who delivered ultimatums with surgical precision. Conrad Michael Hartwell, she'd said, turning around with soap still dripping from her hands. Your father worked double shifts to pay for that fancy California education. He sacrificed so you could come home and take over the family business. I never asked him to sacrifice anything. I earned scholarships. I worked 3 jobs during college. Don't you dare raise your voice to your mother, Robert had snapped, standing up so fast his chair toppled backward. That's when Patricia delivered the killing blow. If you walk out that door chasing some ridiculous Silicon Valley fantasy, you're no longer our son. You'll be dead to this family. I'd looked between them, searching for any sign of flexibility, any hint of love beneath their rigid expectations. Instead, I saw 2 people who viewed me as property rather than a person with dreams and ambitions. Then I guess I'm dead, I'd said, quietly grabbing my duffel bag from the hallway. If you leave, don't ever come back, Robert had shouted as I reached the front door. I'd paused my hand on the doorknob, hoping one of them would soften, would choose love over pride. The silence stretched like a canyon between us. Goodbye, Mom. Goodbye, Dad. 2 weeks later, my college roommate Jake called me in San Francisco, his voice shaking. "Conrad, man, I don't know how to tell you this. There's an obituary in the Millbrook Gazette. It says you died in a car accident." I'd laughed initially thinking it was some sick joke, but Jake read the entire thing aloud. "Conrad Michael Hartwell, beloved son of Robert and Patricia Hartwell, died tragically in an automobile accident on Highway 94. He was 23 years old." Conrad graduated from Stanford University and planned to continue the family construction business. He is survived by his parents and his legacy of dedication to family values. The words had hit me like physical blows. Not only had they declared me dead, but they'd rewritten my entire identity. No mention of my computer science degree. No acknowledgement of my actual dreams. They'd created a fictional version of me that aligned with their expectations. But the cruelest twist came 3 days later when Jake called again, even more disturbed. "Conrad, I drove past Restlawn Cemetery today. There's a fresh grave with your name on it. They actually buried an empty casket." I'd sat in my tiny studio apartment staring at the wall, trying to process the magnitude of their betrayal. They hadn't just disowned me. They'd held an actual funeral service complete with flowers, speeches, and grieving relatives who genuinely believed I was dead. My cousin Sarah later told me she'd attended the service. "Your mother was inconsolable," she'd said during a secret phone call months later. She sobbed over the casket, saying her son died the day he chose Silicon Valley over family. There were over 100 people there, Conrad. Your high school teachers, neighbors, business associates. Everyone believed it was real. The headstone read, "Conrad Michael Hartwell, devoted son, gone too soon." David's BMW pulled into the parking space beside my Tesla, snapping me back to the present. He stepped out wearing his usual sharp gray suit, carrying a leather briefcase that I knew contained enough legal ammunition to level a small city. "You ready for this?" he asked, adjusting his tie. "I've been ready for 15 years, I replied, but my voice betrayed a slight tremor. We walked into Romano's together, choosing a corner booth where we could speak privately. The diner looked exactly the same as it had during my high school years. Red vinyl booths, black and white checkered floors, and the perpetual smell of grease and coffee. "Before we discuss strategy," David said, opening his briefcase, "I need to show you what I've discovered about your parents' current situation." David spread several documents across the sticky table surface, while I ordered black coffee from Jenny, a waitress who'd worked here since I was 16. She didn't recognize me, which wasn't surprising given how much I'd changed. The scrawny kid who used to hunker over coding projects had been replaced by someone who spent considerable time in corporate boardrooms. "Your parents aren't just struggling financially." David began, his voice low. "They're drowning. But that's not the worst part." He handed me a manila folder thick with investigation reports. "After you told me about your family situation last year, I hired a private investigator. What we discovered goes beyond simple disownment." The first document made my blood run cold. It was a transcript of a phone conversation between my father and Marcus Webb. His business partner dated just 3 months after I'd left for California. "Marcus, I need you to make some phone calls," Robert's voice said through the static of a recorded line. "My son is trying to get investors for some computer nonsense in San Francisco. These people need to know he's not stable." "What do you want me to tell them?" "The truth? That he had a psychological breakdown, that he's not financially reliable, that investing in anything he's involved with would be throwing money away." My hands shook as I read the transcript. David reached across the table and touched my wrist gently. "There are 6 more calls like this," he said. "Your father systematically contacted potential investors, venture capital firms, and business contacts, spreading rumors about your mental state." "How do you know about these calls?" Marcus Webb came forward 2 years ago during his divorce proceedings. He provided these recordings to his attorney as evidence that your father had involved him in potentially illegal business practices. The attorney contacted me after seeing your Forbes interview thinking you might want to know. I flipped through more pages, each revelation worse than the last. There were emails from Robert to former Stanford classmates who'd entered the tech industry, warning them away from associating with me professionally. There were letters to San Francisco business development groups questioning my character and reliability. The investigative report shows that your first 3 venture capital meetings failed specifically because of your father's interference, David continued. Maria Rodriguez, the investor who finally backed BuildSpace, told our investigator that she'd received multiple warning calls about you. She only proceeded because she did her own independent background check. Maria Rodriguez, the woman who'd saved my entire career without me even knowing I needed saving. I remembered that meeting vividly. She'd been unusually thorough in her questioning, asking pointed questions about my mental health and family background. At the time, I'd thought she was just being cautious with a young entrepreneur. Maria told the investigator that she was impressed by your resilience in the face of what she called unusual family sabotage, David said. She said most people would have crumbled under that kind of systematic undermining. I leaned back in the booth trying to process this information. My parents hadn't just rejected me. They'd actively worked to destroy my future even after declaring me dead. There's more, David said, pulling out another folder. After your first major success when BuildSpace landed the Morrison construction contract, your father sent letters to the Morrison executives claiming you'd stolen proprietary construction management techniques from Hartwell Construction. That's insane. I developed that software from scratch using algorithms I'd studied at Stanford. Morrison's legal team investigated the claims and found them completely baseless, but it cost you 3 months of development time and nearly $70,000 in legal fees to clear your name. The coffee in my mouth tasted bitter. Every struggle I'd faced during those early years, every setback and obstacle suddenly took on a different meaning. I'd thought I was fighting against normal business challenges and market competition. Instead, I'd been battling my own father's deliberate sabotage. How did I survive all of this without knowing? You're stronger than you realize, David replied. And you had people who believed in you despite the noise. Maria Rodriguez, your early employees, your college professors who provided references. Your reputation was strong enough to weather the storm your father created. I remembered those brutal early years in San Francisco. Living in a studio apartment that barely qualified as livable, surviving on ramen noodles and vending machine sandwiches. Working 18-hour days writing code testing algorithms and refining user interfaces. The constant rejection from investors who seemed inexplicably hostile before I'd even presented my ideas. There were nights when I'd questioned everything. Nights when I'd wondered if my parents had been right, if I should have just stayed in Millbrook and learned to pour concrete. The loneliness had been crushing. No family support, no safety net, no one to call when things got desperate. But somehow I'd persevered. BuildSpace had grown from a one-person operation in a cramped apartment to a company that revolutionized project management for construction firms across the globe. We'd acquired 3 major competitors in the past 2 years alone. Yesterday's Forbes article had confirmed what I already knew. I'd built something extraordinary from nothing. David, I need to ask you something, and I want complete honesty. Always. Do you think they reached out because they genuinely want a relationship, or because they need something? David's expression darkened. He pulled out a final folder, this one marked with red tabs. Conrad, your parents are 90 days away from losing everything. The family business is bankrupt. Their house is in foreclosure. Your mother has been working at Millbrook Grocery for 3 years to help pay bills. The revelation hit me like a physical blow. Despite everything they'd done, learning about their financial devastation stirred unexpected emotions. These were still the people who taught me to ride a bicycle and helped with homework. The same hands that had packed my school lunches had also signed documents declaring me dead. How bad is it? Your father made catastrophic real estate investments right before the 2008 market crash. He borrowed heavily against the business and their home to fund expansion. When the housing market collapsed, Hartwell Construction lost over $2 million in a 6-month period. They've been struggling for 17 years. It gets worse. Rather than declare bankruptcy and start over, Robert kept borrowing, thinking he could work his way out of the hole. The business owes $800,000 to various creditors. The house has been refinanced 4 times. They're essentially living paycheck to paycheck, one emergency away from homelessness. I stared at the financial documents, seeing my parents' lives reduced to numbers and debt calculations. Despite their cruelty, despite the funeral and the sabotage, I felt a complicated mixture of anger and sadness. "There's something else you need to know," David said quietly. "According to our investigation, they've been telling people around town that you died of a drug overdose, not a car accident. They claim that's why you never came home to help the family financially." The coffee mug slipped from my fingers, clattering against the table. Jenny looked over with concern, but I waved her away. "They've been lying about my death for 15 years. The investigator spoke with several longtime Millbrook residents. Your parents have consistently claimed that you died from an overdose in San Francisco, painting you as a cautionary tale about pursuing unrealistic dreams. They've used your supposed death as justification for why their financial struggles aren't their fault." I closed my eyes, trying to steady my breathing. The betrayal went deeper than I'd imagined. Not only had they declared me dead, but they'd continued to assassinate my character for over a decade, using my fictional demise to explain their own failures. So when my mother texted about emergency dinner tonight, she's not looking for reconciliation. Conrad, that Forbes article yesterday was picked up by the Associated Press. Your photo and success story were in newspapers across Ohio. Your parents discovered that their dead son is worth over $2 billion. They want money. They need money. And they probably assume that after 15 years, you'll be so grateful for contact that you'll write them a check to solve all their problems. I looked around Romano's diner at the faded photographs of local high school football teams and the handwritten specials board that had probably been the same since 1985. This town had always felt too small for my ambitions, but now it seemed pathetically small for my parents' deceptions. David, I want you to know something. I didn't become successful to spite my parents or to prove them wrong. I became successful because I believed in my vision and worked harder than anyone else was willing to work. I know that. But now that they've come crawling back, I realize I've been waiting for this moment my entire adult life. David smiled grimly and began packing the documents back into his briefcase. Then let's go give them exactly what they deserve. We drove separately to my childhood neighborhood, David following in his BMW, while I navigated familiar streets in my Tesla Model S. The contrast wasn't lost on me. The last time I'd driven through Millbrook, I'd been behind the wheel of a rusted Honda Civic with over 200,000 miles and a tendency to stall at red lights. Now I was returning in a vehicle worth more than most people's houses, representing a company that had fundamentally changed how the construction industry managed projects. The irony was delicious. My parents had rejected my technology dreams, yet my software was now used by construction companies in 47 states. Yesterday's Forbes interview had been the culmination of 5 years of explosive growth. Conrad Hartwell, the visionary who built an empire from code. The headline had read, the article detailed BuildSpace's acquisition of Morrison Project Management, Davidson Construction Software, and Blueprint Analytics, creating the largest construction technology company in North America. What the article hadn't mentioned was the personal cost of that success. The sleepless nights debugging code, the failed relationships with women who couldn't understand my obsession with work, the constant pressure of managing thousands of employees, while remembering what it felt like to eat ramen noodles for dinner 6 nights a week. Success had brought me everything I'd dreamed of, except the thing I'd never realized: I'd wanted family who celebrated my achievements instead of trying to destroy them. I pulled into the driveway of David's downtown law office, a converted Victorian house that exuded competence and discretion. David's practice specialized in high net worth individuals navigating complex family situations. He'd guided me through everything from partnership disputes to acquisition negotiations. But this evening would be our strangest collaboration yet. Before we head to your parents' house, I need to show you something else, David said as we walked into his office. The space was decorated with law books, abstract art, and photographs of David with various business leaders and politicians. A Stanford diploma hung prominently behind his desk, reminding me of our shared educational background. He unlocked his desk drawer and pulled out a thick folder marked Hartwell Investigation, Confidential. Conrad, what I'm about to tell you is going to fundamentally change how you approach tonight's conversation. More sabotage. Something far more strategic. He opened the folder and spread several official-looking documents across his mahogany desk. For the past 2 years, I've been quietly purchasing your parents' debts through shell companies. I stared at him, not comprehending. What do you mean? The mortgage on their house, the business loans, the credit card debt, the contractor liens against Hartwell Construction. I've been systematically buying these debts from the original creditors. David, what the hell are you talking about? You own your parents' financial future, Conrad. Every penny they owe to companies that I control on your behalf. The magnitude of what he was saying slowly sank in. You've been planning this for 2 years. Ever since you told me about the funeral and asked me to investigate their current situation. I realized that eventually they would discover your success and reach out. I wanted you to have maximum leverage when that moment arrived. David pulled out a spreadsheet showing the debt acquisitions. The house mortgage, $420,000. Business loans, $380,000. Credit cards and contractor liens, $200,000. Total exactly $1 million in debt that you now control. This is insane. How is this even legal? Completely legal. Debt buying and selling happens thousands of times every day. I used legitimate business entities, filed all appropriate paperwork, and paid fair market value for distressed debt. Your parents have no idea that their son now owns their financial obligations. I sat down heavily in the leather chair across from David's desk, trying to process this information. So when they ask me for $800,000 tonight to save their house and business, you'll be in the unique position of literally owning the debts they want you to pay off. David, this feels like something a movie villain would do. Conrad, these are the same people who held a funeral for you and spent 15 years systematically trying to destroy your career. They declared you dead and convinced an entire community that you were a drug addict who abandoned his family. Tonight, they're planning to manipulate your emotions to extract money from you. I simply ensured that you would hold all the cards when that manipulation attempt occurred. He was right, but the ethical implications made me uncomfortable. What exactly are you suggesting I do with this information? That depends entirely on what kind of man you want to be. You could forgive the debts entirely and give them a fresh start. You could demand they meet certain conditions before you provide relief. Or you could let them face the natural consequences of their financial decisions and their treatment of you. Or you could offer them something more valuable than money. You could offer them a chance to earn back your respect through genuine remorse and changed behavior. I looked out David's office window at the Millbrook Town Square, where a few teenagers hung around the gazebo, probably planning to leave for college and never return, just like I had. The difference was that their parents would probably support their dreams instead of trying to crush them. There's one more thing, David said, pulling out a final document. I discovered that your parents have been visiting your grave every month for 15 years. What? The cemetery keeps visitor logs for maintenance purposes. Robert and Patricia Hartwell visit gravesite 47B on the 15th of every month. They bring fresh flowers and spend approximately 30 minutes there. The revelation stunned me. They've been visiting my fake grave for 15 years. I installed a discreet security camera 6 months ago to confirm the pattern. Conrad, I have footage of your mother talking to your headstone last month, crying, and telling you about your father's heart problems. Dad has heart problems, diagnosed with angina 3 months ago, probably stress-related given their financial situation. David showed me still images from the security footage. My mother gray-haired and visibly aged, kneeling beside a headstone that bore my name. She looked smaller than I remembered, worn down by years of struggle and loss. In the most recent footage, she tells your headstone that she wishes she could tell you about your father's illness. She says she dreams about you coming home, but then remembers that you're gone forever because of their pride and stubbornness. They actually miss me. The evidence suggests they've been grieving your loss for 15 years, even though they caused it themselves. I rubbed my forehead, feeling a headache building behind my eyes. The emotional complexity of the situation was overwhelming. My parents had betrayed me in the most fundamental way possible, yet they'd apparently been mourning my absence every month for 15 years. David, I need to ask you something as my lawyer and my friend. What would you do if you were in my position? Conrad, I've watched you build an incredible company while maintaining your integrity and treating employees with respect. You've never used your wealth to hurt people, even when you had every justification to seek revenge. That's who you are. But these people tried to destroy you. They held a funeral for you, sabotaged your career, and lied about your character for 15 years. You owe them nothing. So what's your recommendation? David closed the folders and leaned back in his chair. Give them a choice. Offer them the chance to earn redemption through genuine remorse and changed behavior. But make it clear that their financial future depends entirely on their willingness to acknowledge what they've done and make amends. And if they refuse, then they face the natural consequences of their decisions. Sometimes people need to lose everything before they can find their humanity. I stood up and walked to the window, looking at the house where I'd grown up. From David's office, I could see the second-story window of my childhood bedroom, the room where I'd spent countless hours learning to code, dreaming of creating something that would change the world. All right, I said, turning back to David. Let's go have dinner with my parents, but we're doing this my way. What's your way? I'm going to give them exactly what they deserve. The question is whether they deserve mercy or justice. David smiled and grabbed his briefcase. Sometimes, Conrad, mercy and justice are the same thing. The Hartwell family home sat at the end of Maple Street like a monument to faded middle-class ambition. The house where I'd grown up looked smaller than I remembered, its white siding now yellowed with age and weather damage. The front porch sagged slightly on the left side, and several shutters hung at odd angles. The once pristine lawn now showed patches of dead grass and dandelions. David parked behind my Tesla, and we walked up the cracked concrete driveway together. My hands were steadier than I'd expected, though my heart hammered against my ribs. 15 years of wondering about this moment, and now it was happening. Before I could knock, the front door opened. Patricia Hartwell stood in the doorway, and the sight of her nearly knocked me backward. My mother had aged dramatically since I'd last seen her. Her brown hair was now completely gray and pulled into a simple ponytail. Deep lines etched her face around her eyes and mouth. She'd lost weight, making her appear fragile in a way that my childhood memories had never captured. Conrad, she whispered, her hand flying to her mouth. My God, you look so different. I was different. The scrawny 23-year-old who'd left home had been replaced by a man who spent time in corporate gyms and wore tailored suits. Success had given me confidence that transformed how I carried myself. Hello, Mom. The word felt strange on my tongue. Patricia, who's at the door. Robert's voice called from inside the house. My father appeared beside my mother, and the transformation was even more striking. The powerfully built construction worker I remembered had become a man whose shoulders slumped with exhaustion and defeat. His hair had receded significantly, and his face carried the gray pallor of chronic stress. "Conrad," he said, simply extending his hand for a shake. I introduced David as my attorney, watching my parents' expression shift from nervous hope to barely concealed alarm. "Your attorney?" Patricia asked. "Is there some kind of legal problem?" "Just a precaution," I replied. "I've learned to be careful about business discussions." We followed them into the living room, and the changes were immediately obvious. The furniture I remembered from childhood was still there, but everything looked worn and shabby. The carpet needed replacing, the walls needed painting, and the general atmosphere was one of people hanging on to possessions long past their useful life. "Can I get you something to drink?" Patricia asked, her voice unnaturally bright. "Coffee, soda?" "Water is fine," I said, settling into the same chair where I used to read comic books on Saturday mornings. David and I waited while my parents busied themselves in the kitchen. I could hear their whispered conversation, though I couldn't make out the words. They were clearly nervous and trying to decide how to approach whatever they had planned. They returned with glasses of water and settled on the couch across from us. Patricia had set the coffee table with their wedding china, the good plates they'd used only for special occasions when I was growing up. The gesture was obviously calculated to create a sense of family nostalgia. "Conrad." Patricia began, her voice carefully controlled. "We want you to know how proud we are of what you've accomplished." I remained silent, waiting. "We read the Forbes article," Robert added. "Building a company worth billions of dollars. That's incredible." "We always knew you were smart," Patricia continued. "Even when we disagreed about your career path, we knew you had tremendous potential." Still, I said nothing. David sat beside me occasionally, taking notes in a small leather notebook. The silence stretched uncomfortably until Robert cleared his throat. "Son, we know things ended badly when you left home. We've regretted that for many years." "Have you?" I asked quietly. "Of course," Patricia said, leaning forward earnestly. "We were wrong to react so strongly to your career choice. We should have supported your dreams even if we didn't understand them." "What exactly are you saying you regret?" My parents exchanged glances, clearly having rehearsed this conversation. "Why, we regret the argument," Robert said. "We regret not staying in touch. We regret letting pride keep our family apart for so many years." "Is that everything?" Patricia's hands twisted in her lap. "Conrad, we know we made mistakes. We're hoping we can move forward as a family and heal these old wounds." "Mom, I want to ask you something, and I need you to be completely honest." "Of course, sweetheart." "Do you remember what you said to me the day I left for California?" Patricia's face went pale. "Conrad, that was a long time ago. People say things in anger that they don't mean." "What did you say to me, Mom?" "I don't remember the exact words." "Let me help you remember. You said that if I walked out the door chasing a Silicon Valley fantasy, I would be dead to this family." Robert shifted uncomfortably on the couch. "Son, we were angry. We'd invested so much in grooming you to take over the business. And then what happened after I left?" "What do you mean?" Patricia asked, but her voice betrayed her nervousness. "What did you tell people about why I never came home?" My parents sat in silence, both staring at their hands. "David, would you please read from the Millbrook Gazette obituary, dated March 15th, 2009. David pulled out the photocopy of the newspaper page and read aloud. "Conrad Michael Hartwell, beloved son of Robert and Patricia, Hartwell died tragically in an automobile accident on Highway 94. Patricia's face crumpled, and she began to cry silently. "You held a funeral for me," I said, my voice remaining calm despite the storm of emotions inside. "You bought a casket-printed obituaries, invited the community, and buried me in Rest Lawn Cemetery." "Conrad, please," Robert said, his voice breaking. But that's not the whole story, is it? Because according to multiple residents of Millbrook, you've spent the past 15 years telling people I died of a drug overdose." Patricia's crying became audible sobs. "You've used my fictional death to explain your financial problems, haven't you, poor Robert and Patricia Hartwell, whose son abandoned them and died of an overdose, leaving them with no one to help with their struggling business? Stop, Patricia whispered. Please stop. No, Mom. We're going to finish this conversation because you didn't just disown me. You didn't just declare me dead. You've spent 15 years destroying my reputation in this community while simultaneously grieving my loss. I stood up and began pacing the words flowing out of me like water through a broken dam. Do you want to know what the past 15 years have been like for me? I lived in a studio apartment that barely qualified as housing. I ate ramen noodles and vending machine sandwiches for 3 years while building my company. I worked 18-hour days, 7 days a week with no family support and no safety net. Conrad, Robert started to speak, but I held up my hand. I'm not finished. There were nights when I questioned everything. Nights when I wondered if you'd been right, if I should have just stayed here and learned to pour concrete. The loneliness was crushing. But I persevered because I believed in my vision. We're sorry, Patricia sobbed. We're so sorry. Are you sorry, Mom? Or are you sorry that your dead son turned out to be worth $2 billion? The accusation hung in the air like smoke. Patricia's crying intensified, while Robert's face turned red with anger. That's not fair, he said. Yes, we need financial help. Yes, we made terrible mistakes. But seeing you succeed makes us realize how wrong we were. How much money do you need, Dad? The direct question caught him off guard. We owe about $800,000 total. The house, the business loans, credit cards. If we can't make those payments, we'll lose everything. Everything you built over 30 years of hard work? Yes. The legacy that was more important than your son's dreams. Robert's anger flared. Conrad, we were wrong about your career, but don't act like we didn't sacrifice for you. We paid for your education. We supported you through college. You paid for my education so I would come home and take over your business. When I chose a different path, you declared me dead and sabotaged my early career. We never sabotaged anything. David reached into his briefcase and pulled out the folder of transcripts and documents. Mr. Hartwell, I have recorded phone conversations of you contacting venture capital firms in San Francisco, warning them that your son was mentally unstable and financially unreliable. Robert's face went white. You contacted potential investors, business contacts, and former classmates systematically spreading rumors about Conrad's character and mental health. That's not true, Robert said weakly. I have 6 recorded phone calls, 12 emails, and testimony from 4 business professionals who received your communications. Patricia looked at her husband with shock and horror. Robert, you didn't. I was protecting investors from making a mistake, he said defensively. You were trying to destroy my future even after declaring me dead, I said. The room fell silent except for Patricia's continued sobbing. Conrad, she said finally, we never thought you'd actually succeed. We thought you'd fail and come home, and we could fix our relationship then. The honest admission hit me harder than any of their previous lies. You wanted me to fail. We wanted you to realize you needed us, she said, her voice barely audible. I sat back down, suddenly feeling exhausted. Mom, Dad, I want to ask you both a direct question. Why did you contact me tonight? They exchanged glances, clearly struggling with how much truth to reveal. Because we miss you, Patricia said, and because you need money. Both chink, Robert admitted. We saw the Forbes article and realized we'd been wrong about everything. But yes, we also need financial help to avoid losing everything. I looked at my parents, really seeing them for the first time since arriving. They were broken people who had made terrible choices, but they were still the people who had raised me, who had taught me to work hard, and believe in myself even if they'd rejected the direction I'd chosen to apply those lessons. David, I said, would you please show them the foreclosure notice? David opened his briefcase with deliberate precision and removed a thick stack of legal documents. The sound of papers shuffling seemed unnaturally loud in the tense silence of the living room. Mr. and Mrs. Hartwell. David began his voice carrying the authority of someone accustomed to delivering life-changing news. These documents represent a comprehensive analysis of your current financial situation. He spread the papers across the coffee table, pushing aside Patricia's carefully arranged china. The contrast was stark, my mother's attempt at creating a warm family atmosphere versus the cold reality of legal documents and debt calculations. This is a foreclosure notice, David said, pointing to the first document. But it's not what you might expect. Robert leaned forward, squinting at the papers. What kind of foreclosure? Conrad is foreclosing on your emotional manipulation, David explained. He's terminating your ability to extract money from him through guilt lies and false sentimentality. Patricia looked confused. I don't understand. I stood up and began pacing again, feeling the weight of 15 years of suppressed anger and hurt. Mom, Dad, what David is saying is that I'm giving you a choice. You can have the $800,000 you need to save your house and business, but only under specific conditions. What conditions? Robert asked suspiciously. First, you will publish a full-page apology in the Millbrook Gazette admitting that you faked my death due to pride and anger. You will acknowledge that I'm alive, successful, and that your previous claims about my drug overdose were complete lies. Patricia gasped. The whole town would know we lied. The whole town already believes I'm a dead drug addict. This would simply correct the record. Conrad, that would humiliate us in front of everyone we know, Robert protested. Dad, you held a funeral for me. You buried an empty casket and convinced an entire community that I was dead. How is publishing the truth more humiliating than what you've already done? David pulled out another folder and removed a series of photographs. There's something else you need to see, he said, spreading the pictures across the table. The photos showed my parents at Rest Lawn Cemetery kneeling beside my fake grave. In one image, Patricia was placing fresh flowers on the headstone. In another, Robert was touching the marble surface with obvious grief. These photos were taken over the past 6 months, David explained. You've been visiting Conrad's grave every month for 15 years. My parents stared at the photographs in shock and shame. You've been mourning my death while simultaneously lying about the circumstances of that death, I said. How is that even possible? Patricia's voice was barely a whisper. We missed you so much. You missed me, you declared me dead. We thought you'd come back, she said, tears streaming down her face. We thought after a few months you'd realize you needed us and come home. But you never did. Because I was dead, remember, you made sure of that. David showed them another photograph. This image was taken last month, Mrs. Hartwell. You're talking to the headstone, telling Conrad about your husband's heart problems. Robert looked sharply at his wife. You told him about my angina. I talk to him every month, Patricia admitted. I tell him about our lives, about how much we miss him, about how sorry we are for what happened. But you never considered actually contacting your living son to have these conversations? We thought you hated us, Kerr, she said. We thought you'd never forgive us. I sat back down, feeling emotionally drained by the weight of their admissions and my own conflicted feelings. There's more, David said, pulling out the final set of documents. Conrad, should I tell them about the debt situation? I nodded, knowing this revelation would change everything. Mr. and Mrs. Hartwell, for the past 2 years, I've been systematically purchasing your debts through shell companies controlled by Conrad. The color drained from both of my parents' faces. What does that mean? Robert asked. It means your son owns your mortgage, your business loans, your credit card debt, and every contractor lien against Hartwell Construction. Every penny you owe to him. Patricia made a choking sound, her hand flying to her throat. Conrad, that's impossible, Robert said. Dad, I'm worth over $2 billion. Buying $1 million in distressed debt was a Tuesday afternoon transaction. You own our house. I own your debt. There's a difference, but the practical effect is the same. Robert stood up abruptly, his face flushing with anger. What kind of game are you playing? I'm not playing a game. I'm giving you the same choice you gave me 15 years ago. What choice? You can choose pride or you can choose family. I walked to the window and looked out at the street where I'd learned to ride a bicycle, where I'd played with neighborhood kids, where I'd walked to school every day for 12 years. If you choose pride, I'll let you face bankruptcy and foreclosure. You'll lose the house, the business, everything you've worked for, but you'll keep your reputation and your ability to blame me for abandoning the family. And if we choose family, Patricia asked quietly, if you choose family, I'll forgive every penny you owe. I'll give you enough money to rebuild the business and live comfortably for the rest of your lives. What's the catch? Robert demanded. The catch is that choosing family requires honesty. Complete honesty about what you did, why you did it, and genuine remorse for the consequences. David handed Patricia a draft of the newspaper apology we'd prepared. This is what Conrad is asking for, he said. Patricia read the document, her hands shaking. This admits everything. The fake funeral, the lies about the overdose, the sabotage of your career. Everything I confirmed. People will think we're monsters. Mom, you held a funeral for your living son. What do you think people should think of you? Robert grabbed the document from his wife and read it quickly. This is vindictive. You're trying to destroy our reputation. Dad, I'm trying to give you a chance to rebuild our relationship on a foundation of truth instead of lies. By humiliating us publicly, by taking responsibility for your actions publicly. I turned away from the window and faced my parents directly. Here's what I know about you both. You're proud people who built a successful business through hard work and determination. You're also stubborn people who made a catastrophic mistake when your pride became more important than your love for your son. Conrad, Patricia said, we love you. We've always loved you. Then prove it. How? By choosing truth over pride, by admitting your mistakes publicly, and working to rebuild the trust you destroyed. Robert crumpled the apology draft and threw it on the floor. This is blackmail. No, Dad. Blackmail would be threatening to foreclose on your debts unless you pay me money. What I'm offering is forgiveness in exchange for honesty. Same thing. Is it because you have a third option that I haven't mentioned? What third option? You can walk away. You can maintain your pride, keep your lies, face bankruptcy with dignity, and never see me again. The room fell silent except for the ticking of the grandfather clock in the hallway. Why are you doing this? Patricia asked. Because for 15 years, I've wondered whether you actually loved me or just loved the idea of controlling my life. This is the only way to find out. David began gathering the documents and photos, preparing to leave. You have 48 hours to decide, he said. If you choose to publish the apology, Conrad will immediately forgive all debts and provide additional financial support. If you choose not to publish it, the foreclosure proceedings will begin on Friday. We headed toward the door, but Patricia's voice stopped us. Conrad, wait. I turned back to see my mother standing in the middle of the living room, tears streaming down her face, but her posture somehow more upright than it had been all evening. I don't need 48 hours, she said. I'll publish the apology. Robert stared at his wife in shock. Patricia, you can't be serious. Robert Hartwell, we held a funeral for our son. We buried an empty casket and lied to everyone we know for 15 years. We sabotaged his career and spread rumors about his character. We are monsters. Patricia, no, she said firmly. I'm tired of lying. I'm tired of carrying this guilt. I'm tired of visiting a fake grave when my real son is alive and successful and standing right here. She walked over to me and reached out tentatively to touch my face. Conrad, I don't deserve your forgiveness. I don't deserve your money. But I'm going to publish that apology because it's the right thing to do, regardless of the consequences. I looked into my mother's eyes and saw something I'd never seen before: genuine remorse, without conditions or expectations. What about Dad? Patricia looked at her husband, who stood frozen by the couch. Robert, our son, is giving us a chance to fix the worst mistake we've ever made. Are you really going to choose pride over our family again? Robert Hartwell stood in the center of the living room like a man whose entire world had shifted beneath his feet. His weathered hands clenched and unclenched at his sides, his face cycling through emotions I hadn't seen since childhood: confusion, anger, and something that might have been fear. Patricia, you don't understand what you're agreeing to, he said, his voice strained. This town has been our home for 40 years. These people are our neighbors, our customers, our friends. Robert, my mother replied, her voice steadier than I'd heard it all evening. These people have believed our son was a drug addict for 15 years because we told them he was. We were protecting ourselves. We were protecting our pride. David cleared his throat diplomatically. Perhaps we should give you some time to discuss this privately. No, Patricia said quickly. I've made my decision. Conrad, I'll call the Gazette tomorrow morning and arrange to publish the apology. Robert's face flushed deeper. Patricia, think about what you're saying. Think about facing Betty Morrison at the grocery store after she reads that we've been lying about Conrad's death for 15 years. I think about facing her every day anyway, Patricia said. Do you know how many times she's asked me if I'm proud that our son died trying to chase impossible dreams? Do you know how many times I've had to nod and agree when people use Conrad's story as a cautionary tale? I watched this exchange between my parents with fascination and growing respect for my mother's courage. Mom, I said quietly, are you sure about this? Conrad, 6 months ago, I was kneeling at your grave, telling your headstone that I wished I could ask for your forgiveness. Now you're standing in my living room, offering me exactly that chance. I'm not going to waste it. Robert walked to the window and stared out at the darkening street. Patricia, I can't do it. I can't face this community after admitting we lied about something so fundamental. Then don't, Patricia said simply. What do you mean? I'm publishing the apology with or without you. If you want to leave town, if you want to divorce me, if you want to maintain the lie, that's your choice. But I'm done lying about our son. The words hit Robert like physical blows. He turned from the window, his face pale. You'd divorce me over this? Robert. I've been visiting our son's grave every month for 15 years, crying and apologizing to a headstone for what we did. I've been working at the grocery store, listening to people talk about how we raised a drug addict who abandoned his family. I've been carrying this guilt and shame for 15 years. Patricia walked to Robert and took his hands in hers. I love you. I've loved you for 42 years. But I won't spend whatever time we have left continuing to lie about the most important person in our lives. Robert's shoulders sagged, and for the first time since I'd arrived, he looked his age. What if people never forgive us? Then we'll find new people, Patricia said. But at least we'll be able to look at ourselves in the mirror. I realized I was witnessing something extraordinary, my mother choosing integrity over comfort, truth over convenience. After 40 years of marriage and 15 years of lies, she was willing to risk everything to do what was right. David removed another document from his briefcase. There's something else you should know before making your final decision. More secrets, Robert asked bitterly. More truth? David replied. He showed them a cemetery deed and a receipt. Conrad bought your cemetery plot last month. He had the headstone removed. Patricia gasped. You removed Conrad's headstone? I replaced it, I said, with a different one. David showed them a photograph of the new headstone. It was larger than the original, made of black granite instead of gray marble. The inscription read, "Here lies the relationship between Robert Patricia and Conrad Hartwell. Died due to pride and greed. May it rest in peace so that love can be reborn." Patricia stared at the photograph, tears flowing freely. "Conrad, that's beautiful," she whispered. "It's also temporary," I said. "If we rebuild our relationship, I'll have it replaced with a memorial garden, a place where we can remember the pain we caused each other and commit to never repeating those mistakes." Robert studied the photograph for a long moment. "You really think we can fix this?" "Dad, I think we can build something better than what we had before, but only if we're willing to start with complete honesty." "Complete honesty," Robert repeated, as if testing how the words felt in his mouth. "Tell me something, Dad. When you sabotaged my early career, when you called investors and spread rumors about my mental health, what were you hoping to accomplish?" Robert closed his eyes and sat down heavily on the couch. "I was hoping you'd fail quickly and come home." "Why?" "Because I was terrified of losing you forever." The admission hung in the air, raw and vulnerable. "But by trying to force me to fail, you guaranteed that I would never come home." "I realize that now." "Do you? Because here's what I need you to understand. I didn't become successful to spite you. I became successful because I believed in my vision, and I was willing to work harder than anyone else to achieve it." "I know. But I also became successful because I inherited your work ethic and Mom's determination. Everything good about me came from what you taught me, even if you didn't approve of how I applied those lessons." Robert looked up at me with surprise. "You think we taught you good things?" "Dad, you taught me that anything worth having requires sacrifice and persistence. Mom taught me to stand up for what I believe in even when it's difficult." "We also taught you that we loved our pride more than we loved you," Patricia said quietly. "Yes, you did. But you also taught me that love without respect is manipulation, and respect without honesty is worthless." I walked over to the coffee table and picked up the crumpled apology draft that Robert had thrown on the floor. I smoothed it out and set it in front of him. "Dad, this apology isn't about humiliating you in front of the community. It's about taking responsibility for the consequences of your choices. What if people never forgive us? Then you'll learn who your real friends are." Robert picked up the document and read it again, more carefully this time. "This admits that we sabotaged your career." "Yes." "This admits that we spread rumors about your character." "Yes." "This admits that we held a funeral for you and lied about the circumstances of your supposed death." "Yes." "All of that is true." "Yes, Dad, all of that is true." Robert set down the paper and looked at Patricia, then at me. "Conrad, if I agree to this, if we publish this apology, what happens next?" "Next, we start over. We build a relationship based on who we actually are, instead of who we wished each other would be." "And the money?" "The money is secondary. If you can show me that you genuinely want a relationship with me, not just access to my bank account, I'll help you rebuild your lives." "How do we prove that?" "By committing to family therapy, by agreeing to regular visits and honest communication, by treating me like your son instead of like a business opportunity." David added, "Conrad is also proposing to match any income you earn through legitimate work. If you rebuild Hartwell Construction and make $50,000 next year, he'll add $50,000, but only if you're actually working, not just waiting for handouts." Patricia smiled through her tears. "You want us to earn your help?" "I want us to build something real together. Something based on mutual respect instead of guilt and manipulation." Robert stood up slowly and walked to the mantelpiece where framed photographs of our family's history lined the shelf. He picked up a picture of the three of us from my high school graduation. "Mike, we were so proud of you that day," he said softly. "You were valedictorian, full scholarship to Stanford. We thought we'd raised the perfect son. You did raise a good son, Dad. You just didn't trust me to stay good when I chose my own path. Robert set down the photograph and turned to face me. Conrad, I need to tell you something, and I need you to let me finish before you respond. Okay. When you left for California, I was genuinely terrified that we'd never see you again. Not because I thought you'd die or get hurt, but because I thought you'd become so successful that you wouldn't need us anymore. Dad, let me finish. I sabotaged your career because I thought if you failed quickly, you'd come home and we could fix our relationship. I never imagined that you'd succeed despite the obstacles I created. I never imagined that my fear of losing you would actually guarantee that I'd lose you. Robert picked up the apology draft and held it in both hands. I'm 64 years old. I've spent 15 years believing my son was dead because I was too proud to admit I was wrong. I've spent 15 years watching your mother grieve for a child who was alive and successful, and probably wondering why his parents never contacted him. Robert, Patricia whispered, reaching for his hand. I'm tired, Patricia. I'm tired of lying. I'm tired of carrying this guilt. I'm tired of visiting a fake grave when our real son is standing right here. Robert looked directly at me, his eyes clear and determined. Conrad, I'll publish the apology, not because I want your money, but because I want my son back. The Millbrook Gazette published our family's apology on a Tuesday morning in mid-January, taking up the entire back page of the local section. Patricia had insisted on using a recent photograph of the three of us together taken in David's office when we'd signed the debt forgiveness papers. In the photo, we looked like strangers, learning to become family again, which was exactly what we were. The headline read, "The Hartwell family apologizes for 15 years of deception." The response from the community was swift and divided. Some people expressed shock and disappointment at discovering they'd been lied to about my death. Others showed surprising compassion, sharing their own stories of family conflicts that had spiraled out of control. A few neighbors admitted they'd suspected something wasn't quite right about my supposed overdose, given my academic achievements and the lack of any previous signs of drug use. Betty Morrison, the grocery store manager where my mother worked, called Patricia the day the apology was published. Patricia, I need to ask you something, Betty had said, according to my mother's account. Are you the same woman who cried in the frozen food aisle last month telling me you wished you could apologize to your dead son? Yes, my mother had replied. Well, honey, it looks like you got your chance. Betty didn't fire Patricia. Instead, she gave her a week off with pay to deal with family matters and told other employees that anyone gossiping about the Hartwell situation would face disciplinary action. The reaction at Hartwell Construction was more complicated. Several longtime clients canceled contracts unwilling to do business with people they now viewed as fundamentally dishonest. But 3 new clients contacted Robert directly saying they respected his willingness to take responsibility for his mistakes and wanted to support his efforts to rebuild. My father's response to these developments surprised everyone, especially himself. Conrad, he told me during one of our weekly therapy sessions, losing those clients hurt, but not as much as I thought it would. What hurt more was realizing I'd built relationships based on lies. Dr. Jennifer Walsh, our family therapist, was a patient woman in her 50s who specialized in helping families navigate major trust issues. She'd been recommended by David's firm and had experience working with high-net-worth families, dealing with complex emotional dynamics. Robert Yawing, Dr. Walsh had said during our 3rd session, "You seem surprised that you feel relief rather than just shame about publishing the apology." "I am surprised. I expected to feel humiliated and angry. Instead, I feel lighter somehow." Can you describe that feeling? For 15 years, I've carried the weight of knowing I'd destroyed my relationship with my son. Every day I woke up knowing I'd chosen pride over love. Publishing the apology didn't change what I'd done, but it ended the pretense that I was a victim of circumstances. Patricia had experienced a similar transformation. Dr. Walsh, for the first time in 15 years, when people ask me about Conrad, I can tell them the truth. I can say my son is successful and brilliant and kind, and that I'm proud of him. The financial arrangements had been surprisingly straightforward. I'd forgiven all their debts immediately after the apology was published, and I'd provided enough money for them to rebuild Hartwell Construction with modern equipment and a focus on sustainable building practices. But the real change came in how we structured our ongoing relationship. Instead of simply giving them money, I'd created a matching fund system. Every dollar they earned through legitimate work, I matched with $1 of additional support. This approach encouraged them to rebuild their business while ensuring they maintained their dignity and work ethic. More importantly, we'd established clear boundaries and expectations for our relationship. We met every Sunday for dinner, alternating between their house and mine. We attended family therapy twice a month. We communicated regularly by phone and email, sharing both successes and struggles. The transformation in my parents was remarkable. Freed from the burden of maintaining lies, they seemed to rediscover the energy and optimism that had made them successful business owners in the first place. Robert threw himself into learning about sustainable construction techniques, turning Hartwell Construction into a pioneer in environmentally responsible building practices. Patricia became the company's bookkeeper and client relations manager roles that utilized her natural organizational skills and attention to detail. 6 months after our reconciliation, they surprised me with news that would have been unthinkable during our estrangement. "More, Conrad," Patricia said during one of our Sunday dinners. "Your father and I have been talking, and we want to ask you something." "What's that?" "Well, we want to visit Build Space Technologies," Robert said. "We want to see what you've built." The request touched me more deeply than I'd expected. For years, I'd fantasized about showing my parents my company, explaining the technology I'd developed, introducing them to my employees. Now they were actually asking for that opportunity. 2 weeks later, I gave them a complete tour of BuildSpace's headquarters in San Francisco. I showed them the development labs where my team created new project management algorithms. I introduced them to Maria Rodriguez, the investor who'd believed in me when others had been warned away. I walked them through our client success stories, including several construction companies that had revolutionized their operations using our software. The moment that affected me most came when Patricia met Jennifer Chen, one of my senior developers. Jennifer had immigrated from Taiwan as a teenager and worked her way through community college before joining BuildSpace as our third employee. Mrs. Hartwell. Jennifer had said, "Your son changed my life. He gave me opportunities that I never thought were possible for someone with my background." "He changed our lives too," Patricia replied, though it took us 15 years to realize it. After the tour, we had dinner at a restaurant overlooking San Francisco Bay. The sun was setting over the water, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink that reminded me of childhood evenings in Ohio. "Conrad," Robert said, setting down his wine glass, "I need to tell you something I've never said before." "What's that, Dad?" "I'm proud of you. Not because you became successful, but because you became the man you chose to become, despite our efforts to stop you." "Dad, let me finish. You could have used your success to destroy us. When David told us you owned our debts, I thought that's exactly what you were planning to do. Instead, you gave us something more valuable than money. You gave us the chance to become the parents you deserved." Patricia reached across the table and took my hand. "Conrad, we want you to know that we understand the difference now." "What difference?" "The difference between loving someone and trying to control them." 6 months later, I made a decision that surprised even me. I moved BuildSpace's headquarters from San Francisco to Columbus, Ohio, maintaining satellite offices in California, but establishing our primary operations closer to my family. The move made business sense. Ohio's lower operating costs and excellent universities provided access to talented developers at a fraction of Silicon Valley's expenses. But the real reason for the move was personal. I wanted to be close enough for regular family dinners, close enough to help my parents continue rebuilding their lives, close enough to ensure that the relationship we'd fought so hard to reconstruct would have room to grow. The day we announced the move, Robert called me with excitement in his voice. "Conrad, does this mean you're coming home?" "Dad, I'm not coming home. I'm bringing my home to you." "What's the difference?" "The difference is that I'm choosing to be close to you instead of being forced to stay close to you." On a crisp October morning, exactly 1 year after our reconciliation, we gathered at Restlawn Cemetery for a small ceremony. I'd commissioned a new memorial to replace the headstone about our dead relationship. The new monument was a simple granite bench surrounded by flowering trees with an inscription that read, "The Hartwell Family Garden, where love grows stronger after surviving the storm." We sat together on the bench, three people who'd learned that family isn't defined by blood or obligation, but by the choice to love each other despite imperfections and mistakes. "Conrad," Patricia said, watching leaves fall from the oak trees around us, "do you think we'll ever stop feeling guilty about those 15 years? "I hope not," I replied. "Why?" "Because guilt reminds us not to make the same mistakes again. The goal isn't to forget what happened. The goal is to build something better on the foundation of what we've learned." Robert nodded thoughtfully. "Your mother and I talk about this sometimes. We wonder what would have happened if we'd supported your dreams from the beginning." "I think about that too," I admitted. "But I've realized something important. The person I became was shaped by the challenges I faced, including the challenge of succeeding without family support. If you'd supported me from the beginning, I might not have developed the resilience and determination that ultimately made Build Space successful." "Are you saying you're grateful we disowned you?" Patricia asked with a mixture of humor and concern. "No, Mom. I'm saying I'm grateful for who I became because of how I responded to being disowned." There's a difference. As we sat together in the memorial garden, I reflected on the journey that had brought us to this moment. The pain of being declared dead by my parents had been devastating, but it had also freed me to create my own identity without their limitations. The loneliness of building my company without family support had been crushing, but it had also taught me to value the people who chose to believe in me. Most importantly, our reconciliation had been possible only because we'd all learned the difference between love and control, between family and ownership, between supporting someone's dreams and demanding that their dreams serve your purposes. "Dad," I said, "I want to ask you something." "Anything." If you could go back 15 years and handle things differently, what would you do?" Robert considered the question carefully. "I would have said, 'Son, I don't understand your dreams, but I trust you to pursue them. I'll be here when you succeed, and I'll be here if you fail. Either way, you'll always be my son.'" That would have changed everything. Yes, it would have. But Conrad, here's what I've learned. We can't change the past, but we can change what the past means by how we choose to move forward. As the sun set over Millbrook, casting long shadows across the memorial garden, I realized that my father was right. Our family story wasn't defined by the 15 years of separation and lies. It was defined by our choice to rebuild something real and honest from the wreckage of our mistakes. The boy who'd left Ohio with nothing but dreams and determination had become a man who understood that success without family to share it with is hollow. The parents who'd chosen pride over love had become people who understood that true strength lies in admitting mistakes and working to correct them. We were no longer the same people who'd hurt each other so deeply 15 years ago. We were better versions of ourselves, shaped by loss and strengthened by the decision to choose love over pride. As I drove home that evening, I thought about the question Dr. Walsh had posed during our final therapy session. What do you want the next 15 years of your family's story to look like? Wow. My answer was simple. I wanted our story to be one of continued growth, honest communication, and the kind of love that celebrates individual dreams while maintaining family bonds. I wanted our story to prove that families can survive devastating mistakes if they're willing to do the hard work of rebuilding trust. Most of all, I wanted our story to inspire other families facing similar challenges to choose courage over comfort, truth over convenience, and love over pride. Because in the end, that's what family really means, the choice to keep loving each other, especially when it's difficult, especially when it requires admitting you were wrong, especially when it means risking your pride to save your relationships. Some stories end with revenge, others end with justice. The best stories end with redemption and the promise of better days ahead. Our story was one of the best ones. I'd like to ask you something. Have you ever had to choose between pride and family? Have you ever faced a situation where admitting you were wrong was the only way to save a relationship that mattered to you? Share your thoughts in the comments below. Your story might help someone else who's struggling with similar choices. If this story touched your heart or reminded you of the importance of choosing love over pride, please hit the like button and subscribe for more real-life stories about overcoming family challenges and building stronger relationships. Share this with someone who needs to hear that it's never too late to choose love over pride, and that families can heal from even the deepest wounds when everyone is willing to do the hard work of rebuilding trust. Thank you for listening to my family's story. May you always choose love over pride, truth over comfort, and hope over fear. Until next time, remember that the best families aren't perfect families. They're families that refuse to give up on each other.